It was a cold February night in Moscow. The city was blanketed under a layer of snow, the kind that made the streets shine like silver. Inside the military hospital, the tension was palpable. Anna Vlassova, a young nurse with a secret past, stood at the nurse's station, her eyes scanning the room. She looked no different than any other medical professional, except that she wasn't just any nurse. Her background in special forces was buried deep within her, known to only a few. No one suspected that the quiet woman in scrubs had once been trained to survive the most hostile conditions. Her past, filled with missions, danger, and secrecy, was something she had left behind when she entered civilian life. But tonight, the past was catching up with her. In room 804, a patient lay unconscious, a man with a shadowy connection to the political underworld. Anna's task was simple: maintain his vitals. But she knew that if anyone found out the truth about who he was, her life would change forever. She wasn't just another nurse. She was a ghost, one who had learned how to stay invisible. But that night, as the storm raged outside, she sensed something was off. The usual hum of the hospital was interrupted by a series of strange sounds coming from the hallway. A pair of men in maintenance uniforms walked past, their eyes scanning the corners as though looking for something or someone. Anna's heart rate slowed. It was a reflex she had honed over years of military training. She knew danger when she saw it. She didn't react. Instead, she remained still, pretending to be absorbed in her work. But her mind raced, calculating every possible move. The men's presence was no coincidence. She could feel it. She had been in situations like this before. They weren't here for repairs, and they weren't alone. The hospital, for all its mundane noise and routine, had become a battlefield. Anna stood, ready to fight back if necessary. She was used to handling the unexpected, but the calm that had taken years to cultivate was starting to crack. Her instincts were telling her that tonight, everything she had worked so hard to bury was about to surface. The hallway outside the nurse's station was eerily quiet, the usual hum of hospital life replaced by an unsettling silence. Anna moved toward the door of room 804, her heart pounding in her chest, every muscle in her body primed for action. She had learned to trust her instincts, and tonight they were screaming at her to be ready. As she stepped into the room, the dim emergency lighting cast long shadows across the bed where the patient lay. His name was Torren Gage, a key witness in a high-profile investigation that had put Moscow's political elite on edge. He was the kind of man who could bring down entire empires with a single testimony. But he wasn't just a patient, he was a target. Anna had been briefed on the situation only hours before. The hospital had been chosen as the place to keep him hidden, believing it was the safest option. But Anna knew better. If someone wanted him dead, they would find a way. The men in the hallway were not the only ones looking for him. The real threat was still out there, hidden in plain sight. As she checked his vitals, Anna's mind raced through the possibilities. The men in the hallway were likely just the first wave. She knew the hospital's security system wouldn't hold them off for long. But what about her? What was she supposed to do when the walls closed in? The sound of a door opening behind her jolted Anna from her thoughts. She spun around just in time to see one of the maintenance workers step into the room, his eyes darting around suspiciously. The man didn't belong here. Anna's hand instinctively moved to the small pocket knife she kept hidden in her scrubs. Her years of training had taught her how to act without hesitation. But she needed to be careful. Her mission wasn't to confront them, it was to survive. The man moved closer, and Anna braced herself. Then, in the blink of an eye, he lunged for the patient's IV drip. Without a second thought, Anna lunged forward, knocking his hand away with the force of her body. The move caught him off guard, and he stumbled backward, but he quickly regained his footing, his eyes now filled with cold determination. Anna's heart raced. She had underestimated them. These men weren't just looking to silence a witness, they were here for a much larger purpose. She had to get Gage out, and fast, but she was alone, and she had no backup. The hallway outside was still empty, but she knew that wouldn't last for long. The walls were closing in, every second counted. She moved toward the door, positioning herself between Gage and the intruder. If she had to, she would fight her way out. She had no choice. The man in front of her took another step closer, his intentions clear. He wasn't just a threat to Gage, he was a threat to everything Anna had worked for, everything she had sacrificed. She wouldn't let him take that away. Anna's body was a coiled spring as she stood in the doorway, blocking the man's path. The tension between them was palpable, like the calm before a storm. She had no weapon, only the sharpness of her instincts and the years of training that had made her one of the best in the field. The man's eyes flickered with impatience, but Anna remained still, her gaze steady. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he knew that any sudden action would give her the advantage. Anna's hand slid into her pocket, her fingers brushing the cold steel of the pocket knife. She wasn't going to let him get any closer to Gage. But before she could react, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Another pair of intruders. Anna cursed under her breath. The plan had changed. She wasn't going to be able to fight them all off alone. Her mind raced through the options. The hospital had a back exit through the kitchen, but it was locked down after hours. There was also the service elevator, but that would be too obvious. If she was going to get Gage out of here, she needed to think fast. The man in front of her reached the IV drip, and without warning, he ripped it from Gage's arm. Anna lunged forward, knocking his hand away and pushing him back. But he was stronger, more experienced, and he grabbed her wrist in a vice-like grip. She twisted in his hold, but his fingers tightened. "Let go," Anna growled. The man smirked, a cold glint in his eyes. "Not so fast." Just as Anna was about to break free, the sound of the door to the hallway slammed open. Two more figures appeared, their silhouettes outlined in the dim light from the hallway. "Get back," one of them barked. Anna didn't hesitate. With one swift motion, she drove her knee into the man's gut, sending him stumbling back. As he gasped for air, she used his momentary weakness to break free. But there was no time to waste. She grabbed Gage's arm, helping him sit up. "We need to move," she said, her voice low. The men were recovering quickly. They wouldn't be easy to shake off. Gage's face was pale, his body weak from surgery, but his eyes were sharp. "Where to?" he whispered, his breath shallow. Anna didn't answer immediately. Her mind was calculating, her every movement precise. She wasn't just saving Gage, she was saving herself. She couldn't afford to be caught. "Follow me," she said, pulling him toward the door. She knew the hospital better than anyone, and she knew how to disappear in its labyrinth of hallways. But as they stepped into the corridor, the sound of sirens in the distance made her stomach drop. They were running out of time. Anna's heart raced as she pulled Gage down the dimly lit hallway. The sound of sirens grew louder, cutting through the quiet of the hospital like a warning bell. Her mind was a whirlwind of options, each one leading to more complications. She couldn't risk taking the main stairs, they'd be waiting there. And the service elevator was too obvious. The back exit would be her best shot, but it was locked, and she would need time to bypass the security system. Time was something she didn't have. "Keep moving," she urged, her voice steady but urgent. Gage's labored breathing echoed in her ears as they navigated the narrow corridor. She could feel the weight of every second ticking away. They had to keep moving. A turn down another hallway, and then another. The footsteps of the intruders behind them grew fainter, but Anna knew it wouldn't be long before they realized she had taken the wrong turn. "Stay close," she said, glancing back at Gage. His face was pale, his eyes full of a quiet desperation. He didn't have the strength to run. His wounds were still fresh, his body aching from the surgery, but he was doing his best to keep up. Anna's grip tightened on his arm as they passed another set of locked doors. The exit was just ahead. She could see the emergency exit door in the distance, the faint glow of its exit sign casting a dim light. But as they approached it, Anna's breath caught in her throat. Standing by the door, silhouetted in the dim light, were two more figures, armed and waiting. Anna didn't hesitate. She pushed Gage behind her and reached for the small knife in her pocket. Her body was tense, every muscle ready for the fight. She wasn't going to let them take her down without a fight. The man closest to the door raised his weapon, his eyes narrowing as he spotted her. "You're not going anywhere," he said coldly. Anna's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. She was outnumbered, but not outmatched. She could do this. She had to. With a swift motion, she lunged forward, using the knife to slice through the air. The first man barely had time to react as she disarmed him, the weapon clattering to the floor. Before he could recover, Anna spun and kicked the second man in the chest, sending him stumbling back. She could hear Gage's shallow breaths behind her, but there was no time to check on him. She had to keep moving. The first man scrambled to his feet, but Anna was already on him. She grabbed him by the collar, pulling him toward the door. With one quick motion, she kicked open the exit and shoved him through it, sending him tumbling into the alley outside. She followed quickly, pulling Gage with her. The cold night air hit her like a slap in the face, but it didn't slow her down. They were out, but they weren't safe yet. The sirens were almost upon them. She needed to get Gage to a safe location, and fast. The snow was falling heavier now. A thick curtain that obscured everything beyond a few feet. The hospital's lights were a faint glow in the distance, but they were already out of sight. Anna could hear the distant wail of sirens, but she couldn't afford to slow down. They needed to get off the main roads, away from any eyes that might be watching. She glanced around the alleyway, her eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The night was still, too still. The only sound was the crunch of snow beneath their feet. Gage was struggling to keep up, his breath shallow and labored, but he was trying. That was something. Anna didn't stop, didn't look back. She kept moving, pulling Gage with her, her mind racing. She had no plan, only instincts and the hope that they could make it out of this alive. They reached the end of the alley, where a narrow side street stretched ahead, barely lit by the occasional street lamp. Anna's eyes darted from one end of the street to the other. It was too quiet here, too exposed, but it was their best shot. "Come on," she urged Gage. He nodded weakly, but his face was ashen, his body still recovering from the trauma. Anna couldn't afford to carry him the whole way, but she also couldn't risk leaving him behind. She had to get him somewhere safe, and she had to do it now. As they moved down the side street, Anna's mind kept racing through the possibilities. Where could they go? Who could help them? She needed a plan, but every option seemed to lead to more danger. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind them, crunching in the snow. Anna froze, her body going rigid. She didn't need to look to know they were being followed. "Run!" she hissed to Gage, shoving him forward. "Now!" They sprinted down the street, Anna's breath coming in short, ragged bursts. The footsteps behind them grew louder, closer. She could feel the weight of the pursuit, the pressure mounting with every step. They rounded a corner, but Anna knew it wouldn't be enough. They needed cover, and fast. Her eyes scanned the area ahead, and she spotted a narrow alleyway to the left. Without hesitation, she pulled Gage toward it, her heart pounding in her chest. The alley was dark, the walls high on either side, but it offered the cover they desperately needed. Anna ducked behind a dumpster, pulling Gage with her. She pressed her back against the cold metal, listening. The footsteps were still there, growing closer. She could hear their breath, hear the crunch of their boots in the snow. They were closing in. Anna held her breath, waiting, her body coiled, ready to spring into action. She had no weapon, no backup, but she wasn't going down without a fight. The first figure appeared at the mouth of the alley, a shadow against the streetlight. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She could see the glint of a weapon in his hand. He was armed. She had to act now. She pushed Gage further into the shadows, then stepped forward, her body a blur of motion. She grabbed a piece of broken pipe lying on the ground, swinging it with all her strength. The man barely had time to react as the pipe struck him in the chest, sending him sprawling back into the street. He didn't get up. But there was no time to check. Anna turned, grabbed Gage, and pulled him further into the alley. They couldn't stop here. They couldn't afford to rest. They had to keep moving. Every step was a step closer to freedom, but it was also a step closer to danger. And Anna knew that the moment they stopped running, they would be caught. She glanced over her shoulder, scanning the alleyway. No sign of the second man yet, but that wouldn't last. They had to move fast. Anna didn't wait for Gage to speak. She grabbed his arm again and pulled him down the alley, deeper into the maze of city streets. They weren't safe yet, but she wasn't going to stop until they were. The chase had only just begun. Anna's breath came in heavy gasps as she dragged Gage through the snow-covered alley, his steps unsteady, his body weaker with every passing minute. The city seemed to press in on them, the towering buildings closing in as if the world itself were closing off their escape. She couldn't afford to stop, not even for a second. She had to get him somewhere safe, but every route she considered came with its own set of risks. As they moved deeper into the maze of alleys, Anna's mind raced through every possibility. There was an abandoned building a few blocks away, but the risk of it being a dead end was high. The rooftops were an option, but they were vulnerable up there. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the narrow side street ahead. They couldn't go back, not now. They had left behind a trail. She heard voices faintly in the distance, 2, maybe 3 men. She didn't know how many of them were following, but she could guess. The chances of losing them were slim, and with Gage's condition, they couldn't afford to be caught. She pushed him ahead, her mind calculating each turn, each step. There was a small convenience store up ahead. If she could just make it there, she could duck inside and blend in long enough to shake off their pursuers. "Just a little further," she whispered to Gage, her voice barely audible over the crunching snow. Gage nodded weakly, but Anna could see the strain in his face. He wasn't going to last much longer. He was bleeding again, his bandages already soaked through. She could feel the urgency pressing down on her chest. As they reached the store, Anna moved quickly, checking the windows for signs of danger. The door was locked, but the sign on the window indicated it was open 24 hours. She reached for the door handle, her hand shaking slightly from the cold. But before she could open it, she heard a sound behind her. Footsteps, close, too close. She whirled around, her body instinctively moving into a defensive stance. A man appeared in the alleyway, his silhouette outlined by the dim streetlight. He was too close now. Anna's heart raced. She didn't have time for a confrontation. Her only chance was to get inside the store. Without thinking, she shoved Gage toward the door and lunged at the man. But he was faster. He raised his weapon, a gun, and aimed it directly at her. The world seemed to slow as Anna's instincts kicked in. She dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the shot. The bullet missed by inches, grazing the edge of her coat. She scrambled to her feet, adrenaline flooding her system. The man didn't wait. He advanced on her, his gun raised, but Anna was already moving. She reached for a nearby metal pole, grabbing it and swinging it toward him. The force of the blow knocked the gun out of his hand. Before he could recover, Anna drove her knee into his stomach, sending him stumbling back. The man gasped for air, his face contorted in pain, but Anna wasn't finished. She grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into the wall, holding him there with all her strength. "Stay down," she hissed. She could feel the pressure in her chest, the anxiety building. She couldn't keep this up forever. The man struggled in her grip, but he didn't try to fight back. He knew he was beaten. Anna released him and quickly turned to Gage. "We have to go," she said, her voice steady but urgent. Gage nodded, his face pale but determined. They didn't have much time. The sirens were getting closer. They couldn't afford to waste another minute. Anna helped Gage through the door of the convenience store, her eyes scanning the street one last time before they stepped inside. The interior was small, dimly lit, and smelled faintly of stale coffee and cleaning supplies. It was the kind of place that people passed by without a second thought. The perfect kind of hiding spot. Anna pulled the door closed quietly, her heart still hammering in her chest. She looked around quickly, ensuring that no one was immediately inside. Behind the counter, a middle-aged clerk looked up from a magazine, blinking in surprise. "Are you?" he began, but Anna cut him off with a sharp gesture. Her eyes locked onto his, the unspoken warning clear. She wasn't asking for permission. She needed to get Gage somewhere safe. The clerk hesitated, clearly unsettled, but didn't question her. Anna pulled Gage toward the back of the store, where an old storage room stood behind a door marked "Employees Only." She pushed it open, and they both slipped inside. The room was cluttered with boxes and cleaning supplies, but it was out of sight. The only sound in the room was the steady, uneven rhythm of Gage's breathing. Anna crouched down beside him, her fingers moving to check his wounds. The blood was seeping through his bandages again, staining his hospital gown. His condition was worsening, but he was still conscious, still fighting. Anna felt a pang of guilt. She hadn't expected to be in this situation. She hadn't expected to have to use every ounce of training she had just to keep them both alive. But she wasn't going to stop. Not now. The door to the storage room creaked open suddenly, and Anna's body went rigid, every muscle locking into place. She turned sharply, her hand moving instinctively to her pocket knife. But it wasn't an intruder. The clerk had followed them, his face flushed with uncertainty. "You need to leave," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The cops are all over the place. They'll be here any minute." Anna didn't respond immediately. She could hear the faint sound of sirens outside, growing louder, closer. They didn't have much time. "We're not going anywhere," she said quietly, her voice calm but firm. "We need to wait it out. Keep quiet." The clerk didn't argue. He nodded, turning to leave, but just as he reached the door, he hesitated. You should know," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "The police aren't the only ones looking for him. There's a lot more going on here than just some witness protection case. People are involved, dangerous people." Anna's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" The clerk swallowed hard, glancing nervously at Gage. "There are others, people higher up. They've been watching this place, watching you. This whole thing, it's bigger than you think." Anna felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had known there were risks, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. And now they were trapped. The weight of the situation settled heavily on her shoulders. She wasn't just running from criminals, she was running from a system that would destroy anyone in its way. She couldn't protect Gage forever, and she couldn't run forever. But she wouldn't stop. Not yet. Not while there was still a chance. The tension in the small storage room was suffocating. Anna sat on the floor, her back against the wall, her mind running through every possible scenario. Gage sat next to her, his breath shallow, his condition deteriorating by the second. The clerk had left, but his warning echoed in her mind. Dangerous people, higher up. Anna had seen how far corruption could reach, how easily lives could be destroyed by those with power. She had lived that life once, in a different world, but now it was different. She wasn't just a soldier anymore, she was a nurse, and the rules were different here. But the truth was, the rules didn't matter. Not when her life, and Gage's, were on the line. The sirens were growing louder. Anna's pulse quickened as she peered through the small window in the back door. Red and blue lights flashed across the alleyway. The police were close, too close. The quiet life she had built for herself in Moscow was slipping away, and she knew it wasn't coming back. A soft knock on the door broke through her thoughts. Anna's body went rigid, her instincts on high alert. She turned to Gage, her eyes narrowing. "Stay quiet," she whispered. Gage nodded weakly, his face pale with pain. Anna took a slow, deliberate breath and rose to her feet, keeping to the shadows as she approached the door. The knock came again, more urgent this time. She hesitated. Who was it? More trouble, or was it help? There was no way to know for sure. Anna's hand hovered over the door handle, her mind raced. She had one shot at this. If she opened the door and it was someone from the hospital, someone with the wrong intentions, they'd be dead in minutes. But if it was someone who could help, someone who knew how to get them out, it could be their ticket to survival. She turned the handle slowly, quietly, just enough to peek through the crack in the door. The figure outside was cloaked in shadows, their face hidden beneath a hood. "Are you Anna Vlasova?" the voice asked, low and steady, with a hint of authority. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected anyone to know her name, especially not in a situation like this. She glanced back at Gage, who was watching her with a mixture of fear and confusion. She had to make a decision. She couldn't risk everything on a stranger's word, but she didn't have a choice. If this person was on their side, if they knew how to get them out of the city, they might just have a chance. She stepped into the doorway, her body tense and ready for anything. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice firm, though the uncertainty lingered behind her words. The figure hesitated for a moment before lowering their hood, revealing a pair of piercing blue eyes. The person was younger than Anna had expected, no older than 30. Their face was hard, determined. Not a friend, not a savior, but someone who knew what it meant to survive. "I'm here to help," the stranger said. "We need to move, and we need to do it fast." Anna studied them carefully, her mind weighing the options. It wasn't much to go on, but it was the best offer they had. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked, her voice a little softer now, the edge of suspicion still present. The stranger's eyes flickered to the window, where the flashing lights were becoming even more prominent. "Because," they said quietly, The same people who are hunting you are hunting me too. Anna's mind raced. It wasn't much of an answer, but it was the truth. She didn't have time for games. Gage's life was in her hands, and she had no intention of losing him now. "Let's go," she said, her voice sharp. She stepped aside, allowing the stranger into the room. There was no more time to waste. The hunt was on, and if they didn't move now, they wouldn't have another chance. Anna didn't waste another second. She grabbed Gage's arm, pulling him to his fan. The stranger was already moving, their movements quick and purposeful. Anna followed closely behind, her senses on high alert. The small convenience store was their temporary sanctuary, but it wouldn't remain safe for long. The police were closing in, and if the wrong people found them here, they wouldn't stand a chance. They passed through the storage room, and Anna's heart raced with every step. She could hear the faint sound of sirens just outside, but they were still a few blocks away. She knew they didn't have much time. They had to get out of the city and fast. The stranger led them toward the back door, opening it with a quiet ease that only added to Anna's unease. The night air was bitterly cold, but it was better than the alternative. The alleyway outside was deserted, save for the dim glow of the streetlights. Anna's eyes darted around, scanning every corner for any sign of movement. The city was alive, but the quiet was unsettling. It was like everything was holding its breath. As they moved down the alley, Anna heard a sound, a faint scuffle, then the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. Her stomach dropped. They were being followed. Anna grabbed Gage, pulling him into the shadows of a nearby dumpster, her back pressed against the cold metal. She held her breath, waiting, listening. The footsteps grew closer, and she could see the figures emerging from the shadows. 2 men. They were walking slowly, their eyes scanning the alley for any sign of movement. Anna cursed under her breath. There was no way they could outrun them. Her mind raced as she looked around, searching for anything she could use to defend herself. The gunshots earlier had drawn attention, and now they were cornered. She didn't have a weapon, but she had something just as dangerous, her training. As the men drew closer, Anna felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. Her body moved without thinking, her instincts taking over. She lunged forward, grabbing a nearby metal pipe, swinging it with all her strength. The first man barely had time to react as the pipe struck him across the face, sending him stumbling back. The second man raised his weapon, but Anna was already on him. She moved like a shadow, her body low to the ground, her hands gripping his wrist with a vice-like grip. She twisted, using his own momentum against him, and sent him crashing into the wall. The gun fell from his hands. Anna didn't hesitate. She was on him in an instant, her knee driving into his chest, pinning him to the ground. She held him there for a moment, ensuring he couldn't move, before letting up just enough to give him a warning. "Stay down," she hissed. The man looked up at her, his eyes wide with shock, but Anna didn't wait for him to respond. She turned to Gage, who was still standing behind her, watching with wide eyes. "We need to move," she said, her voice sharp. "Now." The stranger was already a few steps ahead, moving with purpose. Anna followed, her heart still racing. The sound of sirens was getting closer, but they had one advantage now: the element of surprise. They were out of sight, at least for the moment. Anna didn't know how long they could keep this up, but she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't stop until Gage was safe. The rest of the world could burn, but she wasn't losing him. Not now, not after everything they had been through. They didn't stop. The city around them seemed to stretch endlessly, streets and alleys that twisted into an unfamiliar maze. Anna kept her focus on the stranger ahead, keeping a tight grip on Gage as they moved through the shadows. The sirens were distant now, but she knew they wouldn't stay that way for long. Every step they took felt heavier, like the weight of their situation was catching up with them. The stranger led them down a series of back alleys, their steps quiet and quick, avoiding the main roads. Anna's mind raced. She needed a plan, but the only thing she could think about was keeping them one step ahead of whoever was after them. The weight of what they were doing pressed down on her. Every corner, every glance over her shoulder was a reminder that they weren't safe. Gage's breathing was labored, and Anna could feel him weakening in her grip. He was fighting, but his body was failing him. The blood loss, the trauma, she could see it in his face. She had to get him to safety. She had to keep him alive. They reached a small, secluded courtyard, the kind of place where no one would think to look. The stranger stopped in front of an old metal door, one that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Anna stepped forward, her hand still gripping Gage's arm. The stranger turned to face them, his face still hard, his expression unreadable. "This is where we part ways," the stranger said quietly, his voice low. Anna froze, her body tense. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tight. The stranger hesitated, then looked at her with a knowing gaze. "I got you this far. You have to take it from here." Anna's heart sank. "And what about you?" she asked, her voice softer now. "I'll handle my own problems," the stranger replied, his eyes flicking briefly to the alley they had just come from. The police, the people hunting Gage, he had his own fight to face. Anna felt a knot tighten in her chest. She wasn't ready to let go of this person, not yet. But the reality of their situation was sinking in. They were both running out of options. She couldn't afford to keep looking for someone to save her. She had to save herself and Gage. The stranger stepped aside, pushing the door open with a creak. Behind it, a narrow stairwell led down into darkness. "This is the way out," he said, his voice more final now. Anna took a deep breath, her body moving forward before she even realized it. She pulled Gage along with her, the door shutting softly behind them. She didn't look back. There was no time for farewells, no time for questions, only the path ahead. The stairs were steep, the air damp as they descended into the dark. Anna could hear Gage's shallow breaths, the weight of his condition hanging over them. They had made it this far, but it wasn't over. It wouldn't be over until they were safe. But for now, in this moment, there was only the sound of their footsteps and the faint echo of the world above. As they reached the bottom, Anna paused, her mind already moving ahead. She would make sure Gage got out. She would protect him, even if it meant putting her own life on the line. Because that's what you did when everything else was gone, when the world turned its back on you. You kept fighting. And she wasn't done yet. "We keep moving," she whispered to Gage, her voice steady. "We don't stop, not until we're out of here." And with that, they moved forward into the unknown, the weight of their past and future pressing down on them. The hunt wasn't over, but neither was their fight. Если эта история тронула вас эмоционально, подпишитесь на наш канал, напишите свое мнение в комментариях и поделитесь этим видео с другими.